Well, hello again and welcome back to another Christmas edition of Austin's American Flyer, where because of your comments, I'm changing things up a little bit. This is supposed to be part number 2 to part number 1, which had to do with aluminum passenger cars, but your comments came in, got me thinking, remembering, so we're going to change things up a little bit. I hope that's okay, but I have a suspicion there are a couple things I'm going to share with you that may come in handy as you dig those trains out and get them ready to run at Christmas time. Today, let's take a look into my toolbox of tricks here on Austin's American Flyer. If you've got any link coupler cars or engines, sooner or later, I'm sure you've experienced some frustration in terms of trying to keep things coupled together. So what I want to start off with today is just a couple tricks, if you will, that I have found to be very helpful with link couplers. And after we talk a little bit about that, we're going to talk a little bit about knuckle couplers. But to start off with, if you have one of the switcher engines, be it one of the 370 diesels or 342 steam engine, they've got this bar in front. Well, I appreciate that Flyer was kind of new to the game and trying some things out, but I can't tell you how worthless I think this is. Why couldn't they have put a coupler attached to the truck? I just don't get it. So as you can see, maybe you can't, I've actually bent this one up just a tiny bit. And what that does is that changes the angle on the coupler to help it bite a little bit more, if you will. So that's one thing you can do. And if that is not quite enough to help things be successful, here is another idea. I take a rubber band, and depending on the length and type, you may have to double it up or triple it up. This one I'm going to double up. And I'm going to put it here like this, trying to put it about midway between the back and the front. Then I take the first car in my consist. I'll go ahead and move this up here. And this is where it becomes a little bit tricky. But what you want to do, and this may be hard to do on camera without getting my fingers in the way, so sorry about this, is I'm taking I'm stretching the rubber band, putting the link coupler over the bar, and then I'm going to come back over here and put the rubber band on top of the link coupler. And as you can see, it's not an easy process. It's kind of messy, and usually the first car comes off. But once it's done, I've had some pretty good luck with keeping things together as it travels down the track, because what this is doing, this rubber band is creating a downward force. So, as this car is going through uneven track or whatnot, it's keeping that link coupler down on the bar. Now, the one thing you can have problems with if you're using traditional curves is sometimes because you're not getting any sliding happening on this end, because that rubber band is creating enough downward force that it's kind of locking that link coupler. It is possible to have some derailments, but this is certainly one thing you can do. Another trick that I have used at times, and I will give you a link here in this screen, taking you back to a video where you can actually see this in action, is when I have couplers, link couplers from one car to the next that either I haven't had time to, or I haven't had time to, is what it always amounts to. I just haven't taken the time to actually do a little fine tuning, which we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. So if you have two cars that you're wanting to pull together in a consist, but for whatever reason, one or both of them have some issues when it comes to link couplers, another option is to use a twisty. Now, this is certainly not to scale. It looks, sorry about for those of you that are in Tennessee, in Kentucky, please don't be offended by this, or Texas maybe. It's kind of redneckish, but it is what it is, and it works. But you stick the twisty around the two couplers, and then you just tighten it up. I'm not going to do that here. You've usually got a tail. You can either stick the tail straight up, you can leave it hanging out the side, whatever you want to do. But this is yet another way that basically binds these two couplers together and makes them behave themselves when they don't want to otherwise. So that's something else that you might try. Now, Mark also wrote in and said that he found small rubber bands that he, if I understood him correctly, and Mark, maybe you want to do a video on this to show it in greater detail, but apparently he takes the rubber band, goes around the weight, then goes over the top of the coupler and around the weight on the opposite coupler. And that would kind of do what I've been doing here with the twist tie or twisty. And boy, I'm not sure how you do that. I have enough problems with just the twisty. I can't imagine trying to do that with a rubber band, but it works for him. So Mark, please share more about that when you have a few moments to do so. All right. Another thing that I've done, and this was almost dumb luck how this came about. And, but I had a situation, where I was double heading an engine and a consist, and I was trying to use link couplers. And again, we're faced kind of with this dilemma here when you're double heading of, how do you keep the top of that link coupler from bouncing up and down as it travels down the track. And it's a little more challenging to use a rubber band approach on the steam engine because of these bars. Let me move the camera here a little bit so hopefully we can see that a little better. So yeah, these protrusions here create enough height that putting a rubber band here would actually do you no good whatsoever. But fear not, there is another possibility. And here comes this little clip. So I discovered, almost by accident, that I could take this clip and actually slide it across the front of the engine here, like so. And the part of this clip down here, this bar piece is doing what the rubber band would have done had I been able to use it here. It's just putting downward force on top of the link. So that works there. And then in the case of a Northern, which I don't have enough room here to show you that, but the rear of the tender of the Northern has a little bit of a lip. And so when it came to using a Northern in front of the switcher, actually spun this around and put it on the back of the Northern tender. And that, again, created the downward force to keep the link coupler from popping up. So that's yet another trick you can use in a pinch if you're trying to do something kind of fun, like double head some engines, and you happen to have a bar across the front of one of them. Okay, now that we've looked at some of that, let's look a little bit more at the individual coupler situation and when there might be problems with a link coupler and what you might be able to do about it. So I'm going to pick this guy right here, this New Haven. Got a couple of these, and I've done some fine tuning on them. They run very, very well. They're very free rolling, and they've got a little bit of weight to them, so it makes them a really nice car. But as you can see, if you look here at this end, notice where that coupler is. The weight is actually below the rail head. So if we come to something like a crossover or a switch, see that? It's riding up and over. And depending which direction you're going, for example, if there's not another car in here and you're backing up, that's okay. But if there's not a car there and you're going forward, sometimes all of a sudden this will grab like that and your train will suddenly stop or cars will come off. On switches, it does a whole nother number. Now, if you have another car back here, the fact that this is overly sloppy, hangs down too far, it's going to catch on the opposing car's bar, like we can do this here. And that's going to keep it up high enough that it's not going to be an issue. So what do we do with that? Well, that's a great question. Fortunately, it's not too hard. Now you can, there are those of you out there that'll want to set up a jig, take measurements, get out calipers, do a whole bunch of fine tuning. And so forgive me for being a little bit less particular, but here's what I do. I grab the car, I support the back end of the truck right here by put my thumb there, and then right at this point, I press upward towards the top of the car. And what I'm doing is I'm bending this shaft, because what has happened is through time and just handling over the years, that shaft has been bent downward. And so it's allowing the coupler to hang down too far. Now, it's a little hard for you to see. It's not quite where it needs to be, so I'm going to push this up again. And I think we're going to be pretty close there. And there you go. And what you want to do is you want to have the coupler so it just barely misses this crossover. So just getting above the height is perfect. In other words, just right above rail height is the perfect place for these. If they're much higher than that, you start running the risk of the coupler coming loose from the bar on the opposing car. So that's one operation to consider when you're having link coupler issues. Okay. A second thing you can do, or second thing you should do, and this will be a little harder to show, but you want to set your car on a flat surface and see if this link coupler is tilted one way or the other. That's something else that can happen, especially on the side of the pin. Over time, you know, that can get pushed down, and so your coupler starts to twist. As you might imagine, if this pin is hanging down lower, even though this end height might be right, it may be twisted, which may mean the opposing coupler, link coupler, when it connects to that, may have a tendency, especially on curves, as it comes to the outside of the pin, which happens to be lower, to actually come uncoupled because it's tilted down. So there's kind of two different directions and adjustments that you want to consider with link couplers. One is this direction, front to back, and the other is left to right. And again, you can use your finger and just kind of, you want to be a little bit gentle, but you can use a tiny bit of force to even push that up. As long as you're holding back here, you shouldn't do any damage unless you're super strong. Or you can use some simple tools to do that. But that's a good way to get these link couplers back in shape. And as I showed you in the previous video, you also want to make sure that they drop. And as you can see, this is one I haven't done anything to yet. It doesn't it doesn't flop. And while there are a lot of things in life where floppy's not good, this is one that floppy's good. So this is a train set that was pulled around the layout here, showing the cars that are cleaned up and whatnot. And I thought I'd try to show you all kind of something that's neat. That I'm not sure if they did this on any other Flyer cars or not, and I don't know how easy this is to see. It's a little bit dirty here. But there is a little spring that wraps around the backside of the pin, goes across the top, and it actually helps to force the coupler down. And I suspect that they did that just because these cars, as I mentioned before, are heavy enough that they're gonna wanna pull hard and potentially pull themselves away from each other just because of the weight. So that was really cool that Flyer did that. And I kind of wish they did it to all their link coupler cars, because that would be a huge bonus in terms of helping the cars to drop like this, because I've done nothing to these link couplers. As you can see, they're kind of dirty. You haven't even cleaned them up, but yet they still work like you want them to. All right, now let's take a look at knuckle couplers. Someone was mentioning that they have some knuckle couplers that every time they go through a switch, they uncouple. And so I wanted to use this as an example. Here we have a knuckle coupler, and as you can see, it's currently open, which means the weight is up. So we're going to go ahead and close that. And as you can see, that drops the weight down. And it's important that we notice that dropping of the weight. So it's actually now lower than it had been when it was open. Now, if we put it on the track, and we have something like this crossover switch, something where there's a raised middle section, and we have something like this, sometimes you'll see that the car will go through it, and then all of a sudden, whoops, and the train comes unhooked. Now, what's going on? Well, because this weight was down, actually below the rail height, as you can see, when it came to this point, it actually started to scrape, and in worst case scenarios, it'll stop and the whole train will stop. But it catches on the center section, and then the center section pushes up, which causes the knuckle coupler to open, and then you lose your connection. So again, similar to what I did on the link coupler, here's a really, really easy way to take care of this. Again, go ahead and put your thumb on the back of the truck. Press here on the bottom side of the coupler. You don't want to push out here on the end because you risk snapping the coupler. You want to do it back here where you've got good metal underneath the coupler. So right behind this axle, just take your thumb and push downward. And what's going to happen is you're going to just gently move that coupler in an upward direction. Now, if we pushed it far enough, which it doesn't take much, you can see now we're good to go as we go through this junction. It doesn't come loose anymore. So if you're having issues with knuckle coupler cars, I would check that. Just see if you've got one coupler, maybe two that are hanging a little bit lower than they should. And if you try this technique, I would hope you would find that your cars no longer come uncoupled. So some fun stuff. Hopefully this is helpful as you get those trains back up and running for the Christmas holiday season. Well, I'd be curious to know what you thought of some of these ideas. And sometimes you're in a pinch, you got to get the trains running, family's coming, whatnot. Hopefully these will help you get out of some sticky situations and at least delay the time until you have to do some more extensive repairs, or until maybe you have more time to investigate why things are coming uncoupled at different points on your pike. But in the meantime, I think some of this will be handy ways to get through the holiday seasons with a big wow factor and a low frustration factor. So as always, thank you so much. God bless, take care, and let's remember the reason for the season as we approach Christmas this year. Until next time, take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye.